kick your ass. So please, do the same for us, all right? Tonight, you're gonna hear some stuff from Hardwired to Self-Destruct. You're gonna hear some stuff from the middle of our career. And if you were lucky, if you're nice, you might hear some old stuff.
James Hetfield, born on August the 3rd of 1963, is the vocalist, guitarist, co-founder, and primary songwriter of Metallica, formed in 1981 when James answered an ad from drummer Lars. James was influenced by his older brother's Black Sabbath records, and a poster of Aerosmith that James had on his wall. James decided to play guitar and sing as he couldn't decide whether he wanted to be Joe Perry or Steven Tyler.
We were looking for a drummer, and we found Lars in the paper, and we went and auditioned him, and it didn't work out. I mean, Lars was terrible, but he had something. He had this drive that I had. He was going to be in a band, even though he couldn't play, and that sounds familiar to me. So it was probably 6 to 8 months later. He called saying, "Hey, I've got a record deal, and I need to put a band together." And by then, he had gotten quite a bit better.
When we first started as Metallica, we didn't have any of our own songs. We were playing cover songs from these more obscure kind of British metal bands that no one in California knew. So we had instantly had a set list, and we played them. We didn't tell them they weren't us.
So who were you playing back then? Who were you playing?
Well, we were playing Diamond Head, a lot of Diamond Head stuff. This band called Sweet Savage, another band just called Savage, Blitzkrieg, and slowly we started writing our own songs and kind of replaced the covers with our own. And when we first got Jason in the band, that was a good way to kind of break him in, get in the studio, and instead of trying to write songs with him and all this really heavy kind of vibe, just play some cover songs and get a good feeling. There was something about them that hit us, when we were growing up, or actually, being sponges with music. They're really these bands that have helped molded Metallica.
James and Lars would be the never-changing foundation of Metallica, forming a bond that was stronger than brothers.
But when I met Lars, that was it. I thought I knew all the heavy music there was until I went and saw his record collection. Man, you're one spoiled kid, man. He had just a huge collection. And I would just have these blank cassettes and spend days at his house just taping all of these bands I'd never heard of that had cool covers, or, oh, that's ugly and scary. Yeah, I'd record them. So, yeah, he introduced me to a lot of that stuff that he brought over.
Metallica would go through the usual in and out of members, trying to get the right group together, including Ron McGovney on bass and Dave Mustaine on lead guitar, before settling on lead guitarist Kirk Hammett and bassist Cliff Burton. This lineup would record the first 3 studio albums, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets, with a lot of fans considering this run to be the best of Metallica's career. The band would even be the supporting act for Ozzy Osbourne. Unfortunately, Cliff Burton was killed as the band's bus crashed on September 27th of 1986.
But on September 26th, 1986, tragedy struck.
I couldn't sleep on the bus in this top bunk. It was too drafty. My throat, was getting screwed up. So I'd always go sleep in the back lounge.
We couldn't get it all together. We were arguing with each other and saying, well, I want your bunk. Well, I want your bunk, blah, blah, blah. I've never told anyone this, by the way. But our manager said, well, why don't we just draw cards? We said, sure. So we shuffled the cards, said highest card gets first choice of bunks. So, I reach for a card and I pick 2 of hearts. Cliff reaches for a card, he gets ace of spades. James gets a card, Lars gets a card. So Cliff has first choice of bunks. So he says, I want your bunk, Kirk. I go, fine, So he gets my bunk. I end up with a bunk in the front of the bus, which was not as good. And that night the accident happened, and it was a horrible thing because Cliff was in my former bunk. What happened that night was that the driver supposedly hit a patch of ice and the bus skidded. It shattered the windows, and Cliff got thrown out of the bus, and the bus landed on top of him.
Jason Newstead would be on bass next. Reeling from Cliff's death, James was quite harsh on Jason in a hazing manner, which Lars did as well.
Still slightly in shock, do you think, and sort of taking it out on the new bass player? Because, I mean, that was an amazingly difficult role for somebody to step into.
Yeah. There's no doubt that there was a lot of hazing and there was a lot of grief that turned into spite towards Jason. That is pretty human, I would say. So again, when Cliff passed, you know, it was stuff the feelings, and a lot of it came from drinking, for sure. And the other part was just go play. That's our other drug. It really is. You know, the world goes away when we play. There can be no bad. It just feels good. We're connected. It goes away.
There's no doubt that we've grown up as a family in the band and learned a lot of things from each other and together. And there's no way I would change it for anything. It really hasn't changed over all the 16 years we've been putting stuff together. Lars and I sit down with the blindfold on and listen to riff tapes and pick whatever riff sounds best and make a song out of it. Some of these Reload songs, we had lived with them for 2 years. After writing them, going on the Load tour, and coming back to re-record them. There's everyone had their little notes on the road. Well, okay, and fixer, add this. Do this, chop that bit out, and we all kind of had quite a few different ideas when we got back into the studio, which was pretty interesting. You put your notes together and see, you collide that way, and some really cool stuff comes out of it.
Jason would remain with the band until 2001. During his tenure, Metallica's best-selling album, The Black Album, was released, which is also one of the highest-selling albums of all time. The current lineup now includes Robert Trujillo on bass, releasing the much-debated Saint Anger album.
Through the albums, we go through phases. It got to be the James and Lars project, around Justice for All. Then the Black Album started to open up more and more, and this is kind of the epitome of that openness. We came in here with no riffs, no song titles, no lyrics, no anything.
Nothing.
Started from scratch. No bass player. Saint Anger, to me, was very just not quite right. To juxtaposition, it's like a juxtaposition.
Yeah, oxymoron.
What'd you call me?
Sorry, man.
Yeah, I mean, Saint and Anger, they're not supposed to go together.
While recording Saint Anger, James spent several months in rehab for his drinking problems, which was bookended by the problems within the band, leading to the award-winning documentary Some Kind of Monster.
And what I learned going through rehab that anger has a purpose, and it doesn't do you any good if it's sitting down and here festering and boiling, since you're 17 years old.
The band still continues to release well-praised albums, and there is no end in sight.